Also ein Dankeschön an Bender. Wir schauen uns jetzt 10 Last Epoch Builds an, die richtig funny sein sollen. Schon für die 1.0er Version. Ich sehe schon Dornen, Totem, Schamanen. Was? Ein Druidenblade? Beastmaster? Shadow Daggers? Judgment Parler? Okay, geil. Ja, es wäre nämlich auch mal mega, wenn das mal so weit ist, dass du nicht immer gleich wieder diese Tierlisten, Best Builds, irgendwas, wird auch sicher noch kommen. Aber es wäre mal richtig geil, wenn es mal was Neues ist. Also, let's fetz.
Build plays extremely well, super easy to play, one button build or almost. You can
Was ist gekauft? One Button Build. Eine Taste, ein Totem, easy build.
start leveling with it starting at level 4. So what are the pros of this build? Basically, very starter friendly, very new player friendly. It is very easy on the hands. Not much to actually micromanage. It's like you are basically a caster of
Ich laufe einfach rum und stelle Totems?
totems, and those totems are actually minions. They have perfect AI because they are like stationary minions, right? So because they are stationary minions and they just aim at any target that's around them, they don't suffer from the actual movement AI that the game has to offer. If you play a build like squirrels, if you play any other minion that actually has to move, so you basically benefit from perfect AI. They deal, so the build does not have.
Da scheppert's gleich nochmal rein. Und Timo, auch dir Dankeschön. Viel Spaß mit dem Game.
Have a ton.
Spiel ist auf Deutsch mit dem Release, ja. Also das Spiel kommt nochmal kurz zusammengefasst. Last Epoch bei Steam. Link kann ich euch nochmal scheren. Game ist auf Deutsch, könnt ihr auf Deutsch stellen und direkt losspielen. Am 21.02. um 18 Uhr geht's los. Und die Skillung, die sieht schon mal, die schaut schon mal gut aus.
It's not the best at anything, but it's extremely good at everything. So this would definitely be one of my starter of choice coming up with the 1.0 patch.
Das ist sowieso etwas, was du brauchst. Du brauchst ja mal am Anfang ein paar geile Starter-Builds. Ne? Irgendwas, was eben einfach mal funktioniert, ohne dass du die besten Items brauchst und.
Next up, we have Lightning Swarmblade as a Primalist Druid.
Was ist das? Ist das ein Käfer?
Or you could play also the Frostbite version as well. I'll put those two in the same category because they are just like Swarmblade builds. One is a bit more tanky, the other one is way more damage. So if you want to be more tanky, I'd say go for the Lightning Swarmblade. If you want to deal more damage, go for the Frostbite.
Oh, fuck,
It's a melee build. It actually scales spell damage if you go with the Lightning Swarmblade, or Frostbite if you go for the Frostbite Swarmblade. So one is the spell and one is dots. Both rely on a certain form of CC for their main form of defense. So Lightning will stun, Frostbite will freeze. Both are extremely fun to play. It's probably the most fun melee class to play in my opinion. So this is coming from, obviously, from what I have played. The Lightning Swarmblade also scales dodge like crazy because your Armblade Slash actually uses the Serpent Strike tree. So you get up to crazy amount of dodge percentage based on having almost no investments. So you get some flat mainly from your Maelstrom stacks. So you always have Frenzy and a Haste and dodge and stun chance from your Maelstroms. So essentially this build plays, you hold dive to basically stack Maelstrom as much as possible. You melee attack enemies. You stack Tornadoes on you, which will in turn...
Hast du einen Link zum Video? Na klar, schicke ich euch sonst auch dann nochmal mit. Hier, teilen, kopieren. Bitteschön. Findet ihr sonst unten nochmal.
Apply some Lightnings and cast some Storm Orbs.
Sieht halt cool aus, oder? Finde ich jetzt schon.
You're scaling your Tornado to deal damage, but you play as a melee character. Really, really fun, really strong. This one requires a little bit more gear than the Shaman Thorn Totem to start, but as soon as you get good weapons, you're ready to go, basically. Next up, we have the Beastmaster Squirrel build. This is one of the best single target build in the entire game. It plays so well against bosses. It's absolutely amazing. It can absolutely destroy Tier 4 Julra or any dungeon boss. Also, when using the Apogee Sword, you can actually freeze monsters constantly around you as you map in the echoes. So that alongside the experimental affix on your belt to summon a volatile zombie and one of the zombie rings, you can actually have a volatile zombie constantly dying and keep getting all of your stacks for Frozen Vengeance, which allow you to freeze all non-rare or boss enemies on any melee hit. So basically, you always have these stacks, you leap into packs of enemies, freezing them all, and killing them pretty much instantly because your squirrel deals so much damage. Really fun build to play, highly recommend. Flame Rates. Flame Rates is one of the best builds in the entire game to push corruption with,
Necro.
Just because mechanically, they deal so much damage. They are stationary
vielleicht
turrets.
sollte ich lieber Necro
Basically, you're
spielen.
playing turret defense with these guys.
Ja, wenn ich das jetzt schon sehe, ich meine, der erste, okay, der Totem-Bild, lassen wir mal stehen. Das mit dem Druiden sah richtig geil aus, aber jetzt wieder was, wo der ganze Bildschirm leuchtet und alles einfach nur zerstört wird. Das ist halt genau der Spirit, ne?
They have perfect AI as well because they are stationary and they just keep shooting at an incredibly high pace any target.
Da muss man jetzt vielleicht sagen, das ist bei mir auch aufgefallen, wenn ihr solche Skillungen spielt, wo sehr viel Action ist oder auch viel mit Minions, dass da die Performance einknickt. Also ich hoffe, dass mit dem 1.0er, das soll ja auch schon 1.0er Patch sein, dass es mit dem 1.0er stark behoben wurde. Aber das war richtig krass. Also wir reden da wirklich von 140 Frames runter auf 30 oder so oder noch mehr.
And range they have a lot of. On this build, you almost don't build any resistances because you get most of it from just channeling on your rates. You get all of your resistances there. You heal from doing so with Drain Life.
Schießt einfach in
Your
alle
rates are
Ecken.
also tremendously buffed with Dreadshade. There are many ways to play this build. Some play it with a Stationary Abomination. Some play with Volatile Zombies. Some play, you know, there's many ways. But ultimately, it comes down to this build mechanically is just extremely strong. Keep in mind, this build requires idols to be able to be played optimally because you would want to have your rates always summon a flame rate and not just summon a regular melee rate.
So you need
halt to have the adorned idols that give you plus percentage chance to summon a flame rate.
Ja, es stand jetzt auch genau im Chat. Das ist halt sowas, ne? Das sind wieder so Sachen, das ist kein AFK-Bild. Und wie er schon sagt, das kann schon einer der stärksten Skillungen im Spiel sein, aber du musst erstmal die richtigen Gear-Sachen finden, sonst passiert nichts. Also ähnlich wie, blöd gesagt, in Diablo 4 vielleicht ein Uber-Unique und dann knallt's.
Instead of just a regular rate. This does not mean that you cannot start playing this build earlier, although you will only unlock its full potential once you have these idols. Highly recommend. Next up, we have Shadow Dagger's Blade Dancer. I love this build. This is my favorite way of leveling any rogue. Shadow Daggers is it's a skill that does not have a skill tree, but it is not a sub-skill, and it actually scales off of melee throwing with an insane amount of added damage effectiveness to it. It always crits, and it's just incredibly powerful all throughout the story.
Das sehe ich ein bisschen kritisch, ne? Weil es crittet ja immer. Nein? Okay. Sieht auf jeden Fall auch witzig aus.
And the endgame. It can also scale incredibly well. Morning Frost Boots, for example, can double dip on Shadow Daggers because it scales with both melee and throwing, so that any dexterity that you have can actually give...
Oh, Zirp war jetzt echt bitter. So schlecht war der Witz nicht. Ich habe das gespielt, das war mega cool. Kurzen Einhaken zu der Sache von vorhin. Ja, du kannst die Idols sicher gezielt farmen, später bei Monolithen und so weiter, aber du brauchst dann davor eine andere Skillung, weil die vorher gezeigte Skillung halt erst dann funktioniert, wenn du diese hast. Und du musst ja mal was haben, um dorthin zu spielen. Weißt du, wie ich meine?
You two flat instead of only one. Extremely good.
Ist egal, ob die Sachen jetzt schwer oder leicht kriegst, ich finde es mal sehr erfrischend, hier Skillungen zu sehen, die du so vielleicht noch nicht kanntest. Ich meine, so ein Dagger-Bild ist eine Geschichte, aber eben dieser Totem-Bild oder dieser Käfer-Druiden-Bild und so, schauen, was da noch kommt.
Fast Ninja-like, dashing all around, explosions, killing everything, high damage potential. Basically, this build has almost no downside. It's incredibly good.
No
it's
downside.
One of the fastest mappers in the entire game.
Das ist
and
so
I
cool.
absolutely love playing Shadow Dagger's Blade Dance. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Especially for newer players, if you just want to destroy the game, this will absolutely wreck everything. Alright. Next up we have...
Das Spiel könnt ihr auch auf Deutsch stellen. Ist also, gibt mehrere Sprachen, braucht ihr nur umstellen beim Einloggen.
Have the Judgment Aura Paladin build. So, this is a build that I have played recently. It's really, really fun to play. Really good at actually keeping you on your toes.
Ich glaube, dass viele Leute echt Pala spielen wollen.
All the time, since you will want to use all of your mana with your Judgment that gets increased damage. Well, not increased, but more damage based on how much mana you consume. So you're a mana stacker that consumes all of your...
Vielleicht möchte ich das, aber nicht, dass das... Also Skillungen, welche beim Movement eingreifen, was man... schwierig.
Mana, and then you cast Volatile Reversal, and then you start lunging back, forward, or shield rushing. So there are a couple of ways that you can actually play this. Either with shield rush, either with lunge, so, or with javelin, with like dashing to your javelin as well. But this is like the perfect... it's the perfect build to transition from using...
Bouncing als Skill verkaufen. Das fühle ich nicht so.
Holy Trail Javelin. When I was playing it, I was dealing over 60k ticks per just as running around. This is kind of like the RF build of Last Epoch. So you just run around, things dies around you, and yeah, you just win. Absolutely broken, absolutely amazing, great DPS. So one nice particularity about this build is that it scales your damage with your healing effectiveness, right? So healing effectiveness every 5% will give you 1 flat damage. And also attunement gives you, it has an attunement scaling that also gives you healing effectiveness on top of giving you increased damage. And attunement also gives you mana. So attunement actually scales all of your ways to deal damage by giving you more mana, more flat damage, and more increased damage, right? So very, very, very interesting build. Interesting itemization. There's multiple different possibilities. I highly suggest playing Judgment or a Paladin. It is one of my favorite Sentinel build for sure. Going on to the Rune Master. Currently on this patch, Rune Master is absolutely broken with having access to permanent Flame Ward through Frost Wall, permanent Cold Fire Cold Invocation. It just gets so much damage reduction. It gets so much ward. It's absolutely crazy. One of my favorite, Frostbite Frostclaw. I have played this one for quite a bit. It is really, really fun and fast casting. It's not the fastest mapper, so you'll not be the fastest one ever, but you'll have incredibly high damage and also incredibly good tankiness. Just by being a Rune Master, basically, you almost win.
Das kann sein, weil es gerade im Chat geschrieben wird, die Patch Notes kamen vor einer Stunde online. Es könnte sein, dass da vielleicht das ein oder andere nochmal drüber gefixt wurde. Ne? Das Video ist von vor 2 Wochen. Da kannst du schon haben, dass da noch vielleicht das ein oder andere ein bisschen nachzieht, weil gerade geschrieben wurde, dass das eine gefixt wurde.
With your, mastery selection.
Oder halt ein bisschen abgeschwächt. Ich meine, ist wahrscheinlich immer noch viel zu übertrieben.
Frostbite Frostclaw will actually scale Frostbite, which is an element. So you're trying to get as much damage over time as possible. So there is an affix which is elemental damage over time, which you will try to stack as much of as possible. Because it just, the raw numbers on that affix are just way higher than anything else. It's just like super, super efficient to get. So Frostbite Frostclaw Rune Master, highly recommended as well. Another Rune Master build here would be the Plasma Orb Rune Master. This is one that I've played recently. This thing...
Das ist der Spirit. Schau's dir an.
Absolutely slaps. Keep in mind that...
Was ist das für ein Tor, was da mitgesetzt wird?
Anything that you would use with invocations... Currently, as of patch 0.9, you are dealing...
Die Kugel fährt vorbei und tötet alles. Das ist der Spirit, ey. Ja? Und Juni, danke schön, dass du das Game geholt hast.
Way, way, way too much damage because the node that gives you elemental penetration per intelligence is giving you too much. About how much? Maybe about 7 times more than intended. We assume will be fixed for 1.0. I think the build will still be very, very good and it will still push very, very high. But it will not be as good as it is on live. And you might itemize a little bit differently. Overall, Plasma Orb.
Stimmt, Lightning Ball version. Ball Lightning Mage.
You have these orbs circling around you. So the orb itself does fire damage. But what we're really scaling is the actual lightning electrocution that it does. And that is lightning damage. So you want to stack as much intelligence alongside the Mad Alchemist Ladle and try to apply as many elements on monsters as possible. That will give you a huge multiplier, as well as using Morning Frost with Dexterity to try to stack even more flat damage so that it's increased by the Mad Alchemist Ladle. This is just a build that is overall like extremely good. It is one of the best, if not the best build at the moment in the game, although utilizing a bug. Even so, I think in 1.0 it's still going to be really good, and I would highly recommend trying it out once 1.0 releases. Next up, we have the Nova Hammerdin.
Ja, klassischer Hammerdin.
Paladin. This build is absolutely incredible The amount of...
Das ist halt so ein Hammerdien, ist halt für alle, ne? Diablo-Players. Da ist der Spaß. Das Problem ist halt in der Aufbauphase. Es dauert halt ein bisschen, bis das aufgebaut ist und dann knallt.
Range that those hammers have is just insane. It probably
Wie weit fliegen denn die Hammer?
There's like 2 or 3 screens away from you, and it's just you can scale the damage of your hammers quite well as your tankiness. And just because of the mechanics of the actual skill, it's incredibly good for doing arena. It's good for clearing monoliths. It's not the best and highest single target DPS, but it still does it. Overall, this is a build that I have not played, but it is one of my favorites because I just know for a fact that this is one of the mechanically best skill in the game at this moment.
Fliegen überall hin.
So, highly recommend trying it out.
Die Frage ist, ich habe es jetzt nicht gesehen, was passiert, wenn die Hammer auf eine Wand oder so stoßen oder auf Hindernisse. Sind die dann einfach weg?
There are multiple different setups that you could use. Yeah, it's just, I think in 1.0 hammers are still going to
fliegen die durch?
Absolutely broken. And
hat wer von euch einen Hammer zu Hause und kann den mal gegen die Wand werfen und mir dann sagen, ob er auch durchgeflogen ist? Hat sich das physikalisch geändert in den letzten Jahren? Okay. Also, an dieser Stelle möchte ich mich bitte von der Aussage distanzieren und ich möchte euch bitten, nicht zu Hause einen Hammer gegen eure eigene Wand zu werfen. Danke. Für den Fall, dass ein Army zuschaut oder so.
Fun way to play any paladin build. Now,
zu spät, steckt in der Wand, alles klar.
The last build that I have here, we have
Ballista.
The Blade Dancer Ballista. Yes, you've heard it here.
Da Tower-Build von, wie heißt Tower Demon Hunter von Diablo.
Dancer Ballista. Why is this one of my favorite builds? Well, it's not because it's one of the best. It's not because it's just that I have something for...
Ist der Link aktivierbar? Klar. Hier, kannst direkt...
Those turret builds that I just love.
Läuft schon eine Woche.
And with the upcoming changes to Falconer, so we might see some very, very interesting things coming up for Ballista. We have access to some base critical strike chance. We have access to some flat damage. We have now access to transforming our critical strike avoidance into some critical strike multiplier for our minions. So we are going to see some more, a little bit more damage on Ballista. And if we can get this high enough, I think Ballista might be a good choice for 1.0. So I would heavily suggest keeping an eye out at the reveal for Falconer on February 8th that we're going to have on Max Roll.
Ballista,
and see if there's anything that comes up in terms of synergies in the skills that could benefit our Ballista. Overall, I've always played this build. Every single patch, I make at least one Ballista character, and I always have a lot of fun with it. It is quite squishy, but mechanical.
Es ist auf jeden Fall zu wenig Bling Bling. Nee, aber wenn wir zurückgehen, wie schauen, also ich hatte ja den jessirocks, ist ein klassischer Wirbelwind. Ne? Wirbelwind-Toter-Kombi ist mega geil. Der Rune-Master lassen wir mal stehen. Totenbeschwörer, klassisch Necro-Minion-Build, aber auf 2 Arten. Einmal mit Skeleton Minions, die rumschießen, also Pfeil und Bogen und explodierenden Minions. Und overall, also du hast ja eben 5 Klassen, 15 Spezialisierungen, da ist für jeden was dabei. Und ich fand es mal mega jetzt zu sehen, dass ich werde so Meta-Listen, Tierlisten, das kommt wahrscheinlich noch in den nächsten Tagen, aber einfach mal zu sehen, hey, wie viele unterschiedliche Skills da gibt. Das ist halt schon top. Also das dürfte sehr, sehr spannend werden und ich hoffe, dass nicht alles dann auf dem Ende auf einer Klasse zusammenläuft. Aber wir werden sehen. Wir werden sehen. Ich bin gespannt.